My name is Clara. I was 31 years old when I lay paralyzed in a hospital bed, hooked up to a ventilator after a massive car accident. I was in a medically induced coma for a week. But what the doctors didn't realize was that I had regained consciousness 2 hours before they updated my family. I couldn't move. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't speak. I was trapped inside my own body. And because I was trapped, I heard everything. I heard my husband, Ryan, and my mother-in-law, Brenda, walk into the ICU. I heard the doctor tell them my recovery would take months of expensive rehabilitation. And then, clear as glass, I heard my mother-in-law whisper to my husband, "Ryan, if she lives, her medical bills will drain your savings. We'll lose the summer house in Aspen. Just sign the DNR, let her go." And my husband, the man who promised to protect me, asked the doctor for a pen. They thought they were signing my death warrant to save their vacation fund. They had absolutely no idea that my brain was fully active, recording every word, and that I was the sole owner of a highly specific legal document that would legally obliterate them both the second I opened my eyes. The medical term for what I was experiencing is called locked-in syndrome. It is a terrifying, suffocating purgatory. I could feel the cold, rigid plastic of the breathing tube scraping down my trachea. I could smell the harsh, metallic scent of clinical bleach and iodine. I could hear the rhythmic, mechanical hiss-click of the life support machine forcing air into my crushed lungs. But to the outside world, my face was a blank, unresponsive mask. I heard the heavy ICU doors slide open. The sharp, arrogant click of designer heels against the linoleum floor told me Brenda had arrived. A slower, shuffling footstep belonged to Ryan. The attending physician spoke in a low, somber tone. He explained the severe cranial trauma, the shattered ribs, the agonizingly long road ahead if I were to wake up. He mentioned specialists, private care facilities, and the astronomical out-of-pocket costs that insurance wouldn't cover. I waited for my husband to say what any loving partner would say. I waited for him to tell the doctor that he didn't care about the cost, that he would sell everything he owned just to bring me back. Instead, there was silence. Then, Brenda stepped closer to the bed. The suffocating scent of her Tom Ford perfume washed over me, masking the smell of the hospital. "Doctor, could you give us a moment?" Brenda asked. Her voice wasn't thick with grief. It was perfectly, terrifyingly steady. I heard the doctor's footsteps retreat and the door click shut. "Ryan, listen to me," Brenda hissed, her voice dropping to a harsh, calculating whisper right next to my ear. "She is practically a vegetable. The doctor just said it could be millions in medical debt. Your joint accounts will be wiped out. The deposit on the Aspen house will be gone. You will be changing her diapers for the next 40 years while living in a studio apartment. Mom, I can't just—" Ryan's voice trembled, not with heartbreak, but with cowardice. "You can, and you will," Brenda snapped. "She has a $2 million life insurance policy, Ryan. If she goes peacefully now, you are a wealthy, tragic widower with a fresh start. If you let them keep her plugged into these machines, you are a bankrupt caretaker to a corpse. Do not be weak. Ask for the Do Not Resuscitate paperwork. Tell them it's what she would have wanted." I screamed inside my mind. I screamed until my soul tore, begging my muscles to twitch, begging my eyelids to flutter, just to show them I was in there, listening to them bargain my life away for a ski chalet. "Okay," Ryan whispered. "Okay, I'll get the pen." I felt a tear slip from the corner of my right eye, pooling in my ear. They didn't notice. A minute later, I heard the horrific, scratching sound of a ballpoint pen signing a legal document on a clipboard. The man I had shared a bed with for 3 years had just signed an order to let me suffocate to death to protect his bank account. Before I tell you how I survived my own execution and turned my husband and mother-in-law into federal criminals, take a quick second to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, drop a comment down below. Where in the world are you watching from right now, and what time is it there? I read every single one. To understand how a man can casually sign his wife's life away, you have to understand the parasitic ecosystem of the family I married into. I was a senior software engineer for a major cybersecurity firm. I grew up in the foster system, meaning I had no parents, no siblings, and a desperate, aching desire for a real family. I built my wealth through grueling 80-hour work weeks and brilliant investments. By the time I met Ryan, I was financially bulletproof. Ryan was a mid-level marketing manager. He was charming, incredibly handsome, and knew exactly how to make a woman feel like she was the center of his universe. I thought he was my safe harbor. I didn't realize he was just a very attractive leech. The real monster, however, was his mother. Brenda was a country club socialite desperately clinging to old money that had dried up decades ago. She judged human worth entirely by designer labels and zip codes. Because I wore practical clothes and didn't care about luxury brands, she treated me with a thick layer of condescension. "Oh, Clara, it's so brave how you just don't care about looking feminine," she would say, sipping champagne at our dining table. Yet, for a woman who looked down on me, she had no problem spending my money. Whenever Brenda maxed out her credit cards trying to keep up appearances with her wealthy friends, Ryan would secretly transfer funds from our joint account to bail her out. When I confronted him, he would manipulate me flawlessly. The defining betrayal, the one that occurred before the car accident, happened on a Tuesday evening. Ryan and I had been saving for 2 years to buy a massive forever home. We had $120,000 sitting in a high-yield joint savings account. I logged in to check the interest. The balance was $40,000. My heart dropped into my stomach. I confronted Ryan when he got home from work. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed. "My mother turned 60 yesterday, Clara," he sighed, loosening his tie. "She's been depressed about aging. I bought her the Mercedes convertible she's always wanted. It was $80,000 in cash." "You stole $80,000 from our house fund to buy your mother a sports car?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. Ryan stepped forward, his face hardening into a cold, unfamiliar mask. "My mother sacrificed everything to raise me, Clara. You grew up with nothing and no one, so you simply don't understand family loyalty. It's just money. You'll make it back in a few months. Stop being so greedy." He didn't apologize. He gaslighted me, using my status as an orphan as a weapon to justify his theft. I didn't scream. I didn't throw plates. I walked into the guest bedroom and locked the door. Ryan thought I was sulking. He thought I would eventually calm down, accept the disrespect, and go back to being his personal ATM. He didn't know that sitting in that guest room, I wasn't crying over a car. I was staring at the ceiling, realizing that my husband didn't love me. He loved what I could provide, and in that moment of absolute clarity, I decided that if he wanted to play a financial game, I was going to rewrite the rules entirely. I didn't file for divorce the next day. A sudden divorce would have meant splitting the remaining assets, enduring a drawn-out legal battle, and giving Ryan exactly what he wanted, a massive payout for doing absolutely nothing. I needed a cleaner, far more devastating exit strategy. I started playing the role of the submissive, apologetic wife. I told Ryan he was right, that I had overreacted, and that family should come first. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and accepted my submission perfectly, because narcissists always believe their own gaslighting. While Ryan and Brenda were busy driving her new Mercedes to the country club, I drove into the city and walked into the discreet mahogany-paneled office of a high-end estate and trust lawyer named Mr. Sterling. Sterling didn't handle messy divorces. He specialized in protecting assets for the ultra-wealthy from hostile takeovers and predatory family members. I sat across from his desk and laid out my financials. I told him about the stolen $80,000, Ryan's entitlement, and Brenda's insatiable greed. "I don't want to divorce him yet," I told Sterling, my voice steady. "I want to insulate every single dollar I earn from this day forward. I want it structured so that if anything ever happens to me, or if we divorce, he walks away with nothing but the lint in his pockets." Sterling offered a slow, predatory grin. "We can do better than that, Clara." Over the next 2 months, Sterling and I executed a brilliant, legally airtight financial restructuring. We created an irrevocable blind trust. I funneled all my tech patents, my investment portfolios, and my remaining personal savings into this trust. Then came the most crucial piece of the puzzle: my life insurance policy. Through my corporate cybersecurity job, I had a massive $2 million life insurance policy. For the first 3 years of our marriage, Ryan was listed as the sole primary beneficiary. He knew this. He had the policy documents saved in his desk drawer. With Sterling's help, I legally, quietly revoked Ryan's status as a beneficiary. I changed the primary beneficiary to the blind trust, which was now legally designated to go entirely to my favorite charity in the event of my death. But I didn't stop there. I knew Ryan's cowardice, and I knew Brenda's malice. I needed a failsafe in case I was ever incapacitated. I signed a highly specific notarized, backup medical proxy and durable power of attorney document. This document stated that while Ryan was my default next of kin, his authority would be immediately stripped and transferred entirely to Mr. Sterling if Ryan ever attempted to make medical decisions that contradicted my explicit written desire to be kept on life support at all costs. I locked these documents in Sterling's vault. Ryan had absolutely no idea. He still thought he was sitting on a $2 million lottery ticket. 2 weeks later, the universe tested our trap in the most horrific way possible. It was raining heavily on a Tuesday evening. I was driving home from the office on the interstate when a commercial delivery truck hydroplaned across the median. I remember the blinding glare of the headlights, the deafening crunch of metal, and then absolute darkness. The collision shattered my collarbone, fractured my skull, and crushed my left leg. I was airlifted to the trauma center and placed in a medically induced coma to reduce brain swelling. Which brings us back to the sterile, terrifying nightmare of the ICU. I had been locked inside my own unresponsive body for hours, listening to the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator. I had heard Brenda whisper her vile, greedy plan to let me die to save their vacation fund. I had heard the scratch of Ryan's pen as he signed the Do Not Resuscitate order. The doctor returned to the room a few minutes later. "The DNR is signed, doctor," Ryan said, his voice feigning a solemn, tragic quiver. "She wouldn't want to live like this. Connected to machines. A burden. We are ready to let her go." "I understand, Mr. Vance. It's an incredibly difficult decision," the doctor replied gently. "We will begin the protocol to extubate and remove the life support systems in 20 minutes. I'll give you some time to say goodbye." The door clicked shut again. I waited for Ryan to step closer, to hold my hand, to offer one final guilt-ridden apology to the wife he was about to murder. He didn't. "Did you call the realtor in Aspen?" Brenda asked, her voice hushed but entirely devoid of grief. "I sent him an email while the doctor was talking," Ryan replied, matching her clinical tone. "We can close on the chalet by the end of the month once the life insurance clears. We just have to get through the funeral." "Make sure you look devastated when the nurses come back in," Brenda instructed sharply. "Tears, Ryan. I need to see tears." The sheer, staggering evil of their conversation echoed in my mind. They weren't just greedy, they were sociopathic. 20 minutes later, the medical team re-entered the room. I felt the horrifying sensation of hands manipulating the tape around my mouth. I felt the agonizing pull as the thick plastic breathing tube was slowly slid out of my throat. The mechanical hiss of the ventilator stopped. The room went terrifyingly quiet. "Breathe!" I screamed at myself in the darkness of my own mind. "Breathe!" For a terrifying 30 seconds, my crushed lungs refused to work. Panic, cold and primal, spiked through my veins. The heart monitor began to beep faster, an erratic, desperate alarm. I felt the doctor checking my pulse. I felt Ryan standing nearby, undoubtedly holding his breath, waiting for the monitor to flatline so he could collect his payout. And then, fueled by a surge of pure, unadulterated, blinding rage, my diaphragm contracted. I dragged a harsh, ragged, agonizing breath of sterile hospital air into my lungs. I didn't just breathe. My eyelids fluttered. Through a blurry, tear-filled haze, the harsh fluorescent lights of the ICU slowly came into focus. I saw the doctor leaning over me, his eyes wide with shock, and standing right behind him, I saw Ryan and Brenda. Their faces were absolute masks of horror. The fake, tragic tears Brenda had managed to summon instantly evaporated. Ryan looked like he had just seen a ghost, because in their minds, he had. The $2 million lottery ticket they thought they had just cashed had just opened its eyes. "She's breathing on her own," the doctor announced, his voice a mixture of professional shock and genuine relief. He shined a small penlight into my eyes. "Clara, if you can hear me, blink twice." I blinked twice, slowly, deliberately. "Incredible," the doctor breathed, stepping back to check the monitors. "The brain swelling must have subsided faster than the scans indicated. Mr. Vance, this is a miracle. Your wife is conscious." The doctor turned to look at Ryan with a wide, reassuring smile. Ryan didn't smile back. He looked physically ill. The color had completely drained from his face, leaving his skin a sickly, ashen gray. Brenda stood beside him, clutching her designer handbag so tightly her knuckles were white. They weren't looking at a miracle. They were looking at a canceled check. "Clara," Ryan stammered, stepping toward the bed, his voice trembling. He reached out to take my hand, but his touch felt like cold, wet clay. "Oh my God, we thought we had lost you." I couldn't speak. My throat was raw and swollen from the breathing tube, but I could look at him. I locked my eyes onto his, and I didn't blink. I didn't offer a reassuring squeeze of his hand. I just stared at him with cold, dead, absolute clarity. I wanted him to know. Even without a single word, I wanted him to look into my eyes and wonder exactly how much I had heard while I was trapped in the dark. He swallowed hard, looking away, unable to hold my gaze. Over the next few weeks, my recovery was agonizing. I was moved from the ICU to a private rehabilitation room. I had to learn how to swallow solid food again. I had to endure hours of excruciating physical therapy just to be able to sit up in a wheelchair. And every single day, Ryan and Brenda played their parts perfectly. They visited every afternoon. Ryan would bring me cheap bodega flowers. Brenda would sit in the vinyl visitor's chair, filing her nails, complaining about how stressful the hospital commute was for her. They acted like the devoted, exhausted family standing by their tragic loved one. I played my part too. When the doctors finally cleared me to speak, I feigned complete retrograde amnesia regarding the days surrounding the accident. I told Ryan I remembered leaving work and then waking up to see his face. "I was so scared, Ryan," I rasped, putting on a flawless performance of a weak, grateful wife. "The doctor told me you had to make some very hard medical decisions while I was in the coma. Thank you for staying by my side." Ryan practically sagged with relief. The fear that I had heard his murderous conversation evaporated. He puffed his chest out, falling right back into the role of the protective hero. "Of course, sweetheart," he smiled, leaning down to kiss my cheek. "I told the doctors to do whatever it took to save you. We're a team." It took everything in my power not to vomit. 3 months later, I was finally discharged. I was still walking with a cane, but my mind was sharper than ever. I went back to our house, the house Ryan had tried to steal the equity from. I didn't immediately file for divorce. I wanted them comfortable. I wanted them to think they had gotten away with it, and that I was still the naive, submissive cash cow they could bleed dry. One evening, while sitting at the kitchen table, I casually mentioned my life insurance. "You know, Ryan, the accident really put things into perspective," I said, sipping a cup of tea. "The doctor said I was incredibly lucky. I was thinking, maybe we should look into buying that summer house in Aspen you and your mother always wanted. Since I have that $2 million policy, maybe we can borrow against it, or use my bonus to secure the down payment." Ryan's eyes lit up with predatory greed. The hesitation he had shown since the hospital vanished entirely. "Really, Clara?" he asked, practically salivating. "You'd want to do that? My mom would be so thrilled. She's been looking at listings." "I think we should celebrate," I suggested, offering a warm, compliant smile. "Why don't we book a table at Le Bernardin next Friday? We can invite your mother, and we can discuss the financials for the Aspen house. My treat." "That sounds perfect, babe," Ryan grinned, kissing my temple. He thought he was finally getting his payout. He didn't realize I was setting the stage for his execution. The following Friday, I dressed meticulously. I wore a tailored, sharp charcoal suit that hid the slight brace on my knee. I didn't look like a recovering victim. I looked like a CEO going into a hostile takeover. Ryan and Brenda were already seated at a prominent table in the center of the luxurious, softly lit restaurant when I arrived. Brenda was wearing her pearls, looking incredibly smug, no doubt already decorating the Aspen Chalet in her mind. Ryan was reviewing the expensive wine list. When I sat down, Ryan immediately ordered a $500 bottle of champagne. To fresh starts and the future, Ryan toasted, raising his glass as the waiter poured the sparkling wine. To the future, Brenda echoed, taking a greedy sip. You know, Clara, I have a realtor friend who found a gorgeous property just steps from the ski lifts. We can move fast on it. Actually, Brenda, I said, setting my untouched champagne glass down on the crisp white tablecloth, we aren't buying a house in Aspen. The smiles on their faces faltered. What do you mean, babe? Ryan asked, his brow furrowing. You said on Tuesday we were going to discuss the financials. We are, I replied, my voice dropping the warm, wifely tone completely. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table, fixing them with a cold, unwavering stare. But the financials aren't for a house, they are for your criminal defense attorneys. Brenda let out a short, nervous laugh. Clara, dear, what kind of medication are you on? You're not making sense. The medical term for what I experienced in the ICU is called locked-in syndrome, Brenda, I stated clearly, my voice cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant. I watched the exact second the realization hit them. Ryan's eyes widened in sheer, absolute horror. Brenda's jaw dropped slightly, the champagne suddenly looking like poison in her glass. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak, I continued, speaking slowly, deliberately articulating every word. But my hearing was perfectly intact. I heard the doctor leave the room, and I heard you, Brenda, whisper to my husband that my medical bills would drain his savings, and that he should sign the Do Not Resuscitate order so you two could collect my $2 million life insurance policy and buy a ski house. Ryan physically recoiled in his chair, his face draining of all color. Clara, you heard that? I heard you ask for the pen, Ryan, I said, my voice as hard as diamond. I heard you sign my death warrant. You're lying! Brenda hissed, abandoning the public pretense, her face twisting into an ugly, feral mask of panic. She looked around the restaurant to see if anyone was listening. You're crazy! The head trauma made you hallucinate! You have no proof of that conversation. I don't need proof of the conversation, Brenda, I said softly, reaching into my designer handbag. I just needed you to confess to the motive. I pulled out a sleek, black digital audio recorder and placed it on the white tablecloth next to my champagne glass. The red recording light was blinking rhythmically. Ryan stared at the recorder, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. But that's not even the best part, I added, offering them a chilling, victorious smile. You see, Ryan, you signed that DNR to get a payout, but you didn't know that 6 months before the accident, after you stole $80,000 from our joint account to buy your mother's car, I visited a trust lawyer. I pulled a crisp, folded legal document from my bag and slid it across the table toward him. I removed you as the beneficiary of my life insurance policy, I explained, watching his eyes scan the legal text, watching the reality of his failure crush him. I moved all my assets, my patents, and my savings into an irrevocable blind trust. Even if I had died on that table, Ryan, you wouldn't have received a single dime. You tried to murder me for an empty bank account. You set this up, Ryan stammered, his voice cracking, looking completely broken. No, Ryan, you set this up. I just let you walk into the trap, I said, standing up from the table. Before either of them could speak another word, the heavy, imposing figure of Mr. Sterling, my trust lawyer, walked up to our table. Flanking him were 2 uniformed police officers. Let's pause one last time. Sitting at that luxurious table, watching the husband who tried to kill me realize he was about to leave the restaurant in handcuffs, completely broke. It was the most terrifyingly satisfying moment of my life. Would you have had the patience to play the amnesiac wife for 3 months to build the trap? Or would you have confronted them in the hospital? Tell me your verdict in the comments. Because the legal fallout that Sterling unleashed right there in the restaurant was absolute perfection. Mr. Sterling didn't bother introducing himself. He simply looked down at Ryan with the kind of cold, professional disgust usually reserved for something found on the bottom of a shoe. "Mr. Vance," Sterling said, his deep voice carrying an undeniable authority, "I am representing Clara in the immediate dissolution of this marriage, and in the civil and criminal matters pending against you." Ryan looked frantically from Sterling to the two police officers standing behind him. "Criminal matters? I didn't do anything illegal. The DNR was a medical decision recommended by the hospital. Signing a Do Not Resuscitate order under the false pretense of acting in the patient's best interest, when your actual documented motive was to expedite her death for financial gain, constitutes attempted manslaughter," one of the police officers stated, stepping forward and unhooking the handcuffs from his belt. Furthermore, the unauthorized transfer of $80,000 from a joint marital asset account, immediately followed by the attempted liquidation of the primary account holder, establishes a clear pattern of financial fraud and conspiracy. "You can't prove any of that," Brenda shrieked, standing up, her pearl necklace rattling against her chest. "She was in a coma. It's her word against ours." Sterling tapped the digital audio recorder sitting on the table. The red light was still blinking. "Actually, ma'am, it's your own recorded confession against you. You just confirmed your motive on tape in a public space with no expectation of privacy." Brenda went completely pale. She collapsed back into her chair, her arrogant socialite facade shattering into a million pieces. "Mr. Vance," the officer said, grabbing Ryan's arm and pulling him out of his chair. "Stand up, put your hands behind your back." Ryan didn't fight. He was too stunned, too utterly broken by the realization that the woman he thought was a naive, submissive ATM had just orchestrated his absolute destruction. He let the officer snap the cold metal cuffs around his wrists. As they marched Ryan through the center of the luxurious, hushed restaurant, past the staring, whispering patrons, I looked down at Brenda. She was trembling, staring at her empty champagne glass. "I'll be seeing you in civil court, Brenda," I said quietly. "For emotional distress, conspiracy, and the $80,000 your son stole for your car, I'm going to take the Mercedes. And then I'm going to take whatever you have left." I turned and walked out of the restaurant with Mr. Sterling, the crisp night air feeling cleaner than it ever had before. The fallout was swift and merciless. The criminal trial for attempted manslaughter was complicated, but the audio recording of their confession at the restaurant, combined with the financial records Sterling provided showing Ryan's desperate, greedy maneuvering right before the accident, was enough to secure a plea deal. Ryan pleaded guilty to felony reckless endangerment and severe financial fraud to avoid a longer sentence. He is currently serving 4 years in a state penitentiary. Brenda wasn't charged criminally, as she hadn't signed the DNR herself, but I absolutely destroyed her in civil court. I sued her for the stolen $80,000 plus damages. To pay the judgment, she was forced to sell the Mercedes, liquidate her meager retirement savings, and downsize from her rented condo to a tiny, run-down apartment on the outskirts of the city. Her country club friends abandoned her completely when the scandal hit the local news. The socialite died the day her son was handcuffed in a 5-star restaurant. My divorce was incredibly simple, because my assets were legally locked in the blind trust prior to the accident, and because Ryan was incarcerated for a felony committed against me, he walked away with absolutely nothing. No alimony, no settlement, just a prison uniform and a mountain of legal debt. I didn't stay in the house we shared. I sold it, took the massive equity, and moved to a quiet, beautiful piece of land in the Pacific Northwest. I built a custom single-story home surrounded by towering pine trees, a place where I feel completely safe. I still work in cybersecurity, but I consult on my own terms now. I have a small, fiercely loyal circle of friends who love me for who I am, not for what I can buy them. Looking back at the nightmare of the ICU, the most profound lesson I learned wasn't about the darkness of human greed or the intricate beauty of trust law. It was a terrifying, crucial lesson about the nature of betrayal and survival. When you are the wallet for toxic, narcissistic people, they do not view you as a human being. You are an appliance. You are an asset to be managed, and if necessary, liquidated. Ryan and Brenda looked at a woman fighting for her life in a hospital bed and saw nothing but a ticking clock standing between them and a payout. But here is what they didn't understand about people who build their own wealth from nothing. We are not weak. We may crave love, we may be vulnerable, and we may ignore the red flags for too long because we desperately want a family. But when the illusion shatters, when we realize we are being hunted, the vulnerability instantly transforms into a cold, primal, unyielding armor. When you realize the people around you are parasites, do not confront them. Do not scream or cry or try to appeal to a conscience they do not possess. Smile. Play the role they expect you to play. Let them think you are naive. Let them think their manipulation is working perfectly. And in the silence, in the dark, build your fortress. Hire the lawyer. Move the money. Secure the documents. Protect yourself with absolute, ruthless legal precision. Let them walk into the restaurant or the courtroom or the hospital room confident in their victory. Let them order the champagne. And then, when the time is right, hand them the check, step back, and let the truth be the executioner. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, if it validated your own experiences with toxic families or financial abuse, or if you simply appreciate the cold, precise beauty of legal karma, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. Protect your heart, protect your assets, and never let them see you coming. I will see you in the next story.